town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie.
As I mentioned last week, Christmas celebrations began to change in the late 19th century. I was really surprised to discover the tipping point in this evolution. In 1822, Clement Clark Moore, a wealthy New Yorker, wrote a poem entitled A Visit from St. Nicholas. We're all familiar with the text. "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." Moore's poem was not entirely original. He pieced together existing legends, poems, and stories about Santa Claus. He was responding to a desire to return to a simpler, happier version of home life. Moore's poem captured this nostalgic longing, even though his version of Christmas had never actually existed in the United States. He created a new Christmas ideal, and it took off in the national imagination. I learned that more than any other text, it was Moore's poem that introduced the American public to the joys of a domestic Christmas. One historian wrote that in 1830, the National Gazette explained the inner meaning of the new Christmas. That newspaper would not be appearing on December 25th because it was a day to forget business in favor of domestic pleasures. And domestic pleasures were the most important thing in life, more important even than social standing, poverty, and external disappointments or calamities. In this new vision of Christmas, good children rather than street gangs took center stage. Christmas was a perfect vehicle for bringing religion into the home and for compensating for society's failures. By reworking older practices, 19th century Americans recast the holiday to fit American culture. The festival focused on the very essence of Christian home sentiment that venerated Jesus and honored children. At the center of this new domestic holiday stood Santa Claus, who, laden with small toys and treats, called on more and more American children each year. Gift-giving, gestures of charity, and the decoration of Christmas trees linked members of each nuclear family to one another, to church, and to society. These customs symbolically bridged the widening gap between rich and poor, rejuvenated the weakening bonds between church and family, and channeled the immoderation of the marketplace into charitable goodwill. However, with the evolution of Christmas into a family and child-centered holiday, new concerns arose. For the American middle and upper classes, Christmas presents tended toward extravagant toys and luxury goods. As a result, Christmas generated new anxiety about private consumption and greed. People were especially worried that children would become selfish and spoiled. In response to this concern, magazines published stories about the role of children in German Christmas customs. And these stories were quite effective in influencing American children. They related that in Germany, children were not greedy. They did not only receive gifts, but they also worked hard to prepare Christmas gifts for their parents and siblings. The hope was that American children would learn virtue from their German counterparts. A legend about a little-known saint became popular in this regard. Saint Hermann Joseph was a Norbertine monk in 7th century Germany. According to legend, he was an especially devout child. One day, having nothing else to give our Lord, he offered an apple to a statue of the Virgin and Child. The child Jesus himself reached down and took the apple. From then on, little Herman offered everything he could to the Virgin and Child. In 1869, our little sisters in Philadelphia were visited by just such a saintly child, the daughter of a Mrs. Emma Drexel, who was mentioned numerous times in the foundation book during the sisters' first months in the city. One of America's wealthiest families, the Drexels opened their home to the poor of Philadelphia twice a week, offering whatever assistance they could from rent money to shoes, food, and burial funds. Emma Drexel and her 3 young daughters were directly involved in this charitable work, and the mother took great pains to teach her daughters how to serve others with humility. During the Christmas season, Mrs. Drexel donated fabric and blankets to the little sisters. But what's remarkable is the generosity of her 3 daughters. The middle child, Katherine, who was 12 years old at the time, suggested that she and her sisters sell all of their Christmas gifts and give the money to the little sisters for the needs of the elderly. Her sisters agreed, the parents gave their permission, and the girls raised almost $100, which they brought to the home on January 3, 1870. The young girl who initiated this charitable gesture was, of course, the same Katherine Drexel who would go on to establish a religious congregation to serve Native and African Americans, and who would one day be declared a Catholic saint. In these weeks leading up to Christmas, we might ask ourselves how we are involving the children we know in our holiday preparations. Are we teaching them that, as Jesus said, it is more blessed to give than to receive? Pope Francis frequently speaks about fostering relationships between the young and the old. I can attest that the elderly love receiving attention from young people, especially during the Christmas season when the pain of loneliness can be intense. And by reaching out to the elderly, young people can discover the joy of self-gift. I ought to know. Volunteering with the elderly is how I discovered my vocation.